Hey everybody, real quick, if you need a recap of Season 2 or Season 1, I've got that. I'll put a tab in the upper right-hand corner. You can just click that and get all caught up. Now, Season 3 picks up right where Season 2 left off. Judy rushes Jen to the hospital. Judy's fine. She's a little banged up, but Jen is in rough shape. She's responsive, but she took the brunt of the hit. Both women, though, are admitted to the hospital. They're both sitting next to each other. And Jen just can't believe that it's another hit and run. Jen then asks Judy, does Charlie know? And Judy tells her, no, but you should probably call him. And Jen's a little bit hesitant to do that because Charlie's had such a tough year. But Charlie's tough year got even tougher because he found the letters. The letters from his mom that she wrote to Judy. So at this point, he knows that his mother hasn't been telling him something, but he doesn't have much time to figure it out because the doorbell rings, and when he goes to answer it, to his surprise, it's a very bloody Ben looking for Jen. Charlie asks Ben if he's all right because his face is all banged up, but Ben seems very out of it, and then he just face plants. Charlie has to pick him up, put him back into Ben's car, and eventually take him to the hospital. When he gets in the car, he sees the vodka bottle, so he knows that Ben's drunk. He sees the windshield, so he knows that Ben was drinking and driving and probably hit something. But when Charlie asks Ben what happened, Ben tells him, I don't really remember. He tells Charlie the last thing he remembers is finding out that they found Steve's body in the woods, and he gets pretty emotional about it. When Ben eventually pulls himself together, he asks Charlie, can you just keep this between us? It could be really bad news if people found out I was drinking and driving and hit something. Don't even tell your mom. Right before Charlie's about to take Ben to the hospital, he gets a phone call from his mother, but he sends it to voicemail. He then drives him unknowingly to the same hospital where his mother and Judy are. And his mom and Judy have found out that they have to go for CAT scans, which Judy's all right with, but Jen wants to get the hell out of there. She has no interest in spending Charlie's birthday in the hospital. But as Judy heads off to go take care of hers, Jen gets a phone call, and as she's reaching for the phone, she knocks over her cup of ice, so now her bed's all wet, which makes her more frustrated. But who she thought would be Charlie ends up being Detective Perez on the other line. Both Detective Perez and Nick headed to the scene of where they found Steve's body, and Detective Perez was really trying to cover for Jen. Nick, being the good cop, was trying to get to the bottom of how this body showed up where it did, who might have done something to it, but Detective Perez was able to sneak away for a little bit and make a phone call to Jen. Unfortunately, she's in the middle of the woods and it's pretty garbled. Detective Perez isn't even able to tell Jen about the body because Nick walks up and tells her that the person who found the body is ready to make a statement. And the lady that found the body recognizes Detective Perez. She even says, I've seen you here before, but Detective Perez is adamant, no, you haven't. But she definitely did. As Detective Perez starts to take down this woman's statement, Jen is calling her back, but getting no answer. And finally, Jen has had enough. She rips out all the wires and she's ready to just walk out of the hospital. But one of the nurses walks in with a police officer, and they joke about how they thought they had a runner. So Jen has to improvise and say, nope, I was just getting ready to go and do my CAT scan. As Jen goes off to do her CAT scan, Judy is returning from hers, and she's sweet-talking the nurse. She has a certain set of skills, a set of skills that makes it a nightmare on hospitals like this one. When she was a kid, she would fake a seizure so her mom could sneak in and steal meds from the hospital, and she had a very convincing fake seizure. So as she's sweet-talking the nurse, she starts to fake a seizure while simultaneously stealing the nurse's badge. And when the nurse goes to grab her something to drink, Judy is able to sneak in and steal Jen some pills to make the pain go away quicker. Judy then returns to the room, sneaks the pills under the bed, and she sees the phone ringing, and it's Charlie. She doesn't quite know what to tell Charlie. She doesn't want to break the news to him. And Charlie, after reading the letter, isn't really in the mood to talk to Judy Hale. Charlie eventually says, Judy, I read the letter, but Judy doesn't know what he's talking about. And Charlie gets so frustrated that he hangs up the phone. At that moment, Ben comes around the corner and knocks into Judy. Since being at the hospital, some of his memories come back, like the fact that he was in a hit and run and he was the driver. It made him a little sick, but it makes him even more sick when he finds out from Judy that they're in the hospital because they got hit by a hit and run driver. While Ben doesn't own up to it, he knows that he was the one driving the car. The excuse on why he's at the hospital, he tells Judy, is because he fell, hit his head. Ben then tells Judy that they found Steve's body. Judy gives him a big hug and starts to apologize to him, but now she's a little bit concerned for another reason. At the moment that Ben is telling Judy this, Jen has returned from her CAT scan, and she's actually sitting in Judy's bed because her bed is still wet from the spilled drink. The doctor comes in and tells her that nothing's broken, but unfortunately the CAT scan found something. A mass. A few of them. So she's going to have to go to an oncologist because there's a very real chance that she has cancer. But the doctor thinks that he's talking to Judy because Jen is sitting in Judy's bed, which means that Jen is fine, besides a few bruised ribs. Judy, on the other hand, she might be living with cancer. It's a relief to Jen, but now she has to figure out a way to tell Judy this. And when Judy returns, Jen doesn't say a word. Judy gives Jen the bad news about Steve's body being discovered, which, of course, doesn't sit well with Jen. But when Jen calms down a little bit, Judy pulls out the pills that she stole for Jen, and they have a good laugh about it. Judy looks Jen in the eye and says, I know this is a lot, but we've been through a lot this year already, and we've survived because we had each other. They give each other a hug, but Jen still hasn't told Judy what she knows. In episode 2, Jen is trying to talk herself up to telling Judy about the cancer, but she ironically gets interrupted by Judy, who wants to make sure everything's all right in the bathroom. When Jen exits, she finds Judy making cupcakes for Charlie because, after all, it still is his birthday. That's when Jen sits Judy down and she says, we have something to talk about. And Judy says, I know, they found Steve's body. Jen uses this as an excuse to push the cancer talk to the side. As usual, Judy Hale has found a spin job to make this a positive, that they no longer have to deal with the pressure of Steve's body and the fact that Steve's family gets some closure. When this conversation hits a lull, it does open the door for Jen to tell Judy about the cancer, but instead, she just asks her, do you want some wine? And Judy says, yeah, I'll grab some weed. Judy goes into the guest house, but she's shocked to find Charlie sitting there on her bed with a gun. She quickly calls Jen in, and Charlie looks at both of them and says, did you kill Steve Woods? I mean, you wrote us goodbye letters, and you were going to leave us here with her after what she did with Dad? Both women are pretty confused on how Charlie found out that Judy was the one who killed Ted. But what Charlie actually thinks happened is that Judy had an affair with Ted, which in a weird way is a relief for both women. Charlie looks at his mom and says, all I know is that Steve Woods is dead, and you guys look guilty as hell. So what happened? Why did you burn his car? Jen starts gaslighting Charlie a little bit, putting on the waterworks, but the story she tells him is that it was the Greek mafia. She burned the car because Steve was involved with them and she didn't want it getting back to her, so she got rid of any evidence. She told the police and they bought it hook, line, and sinker because they know how innocent she is. It's a relief for them because it seems like Charlie does buy this. But when it comes to Judy and Ted, Jen doesn't let Judy tell the truth. She says, nope, Charlie, you caught us there. Yep, Judy had an affair with your dad, but you know what? I forgave her because she seemed really regretful about it. Judy goes along with the lie, and it gets Charlie to calm down a little bit and hand over the gun to his mom. Jen goes to put it back in the same safe that she was keeping the bird that she killed Steve with, but the bird isn't there. And when she asks Charlie what happened to it, he tells her, I gave it back to Henry. It is his after all. And the problem is, Henry's not at the house. He's over at Shandy's, so she's going to have to wait to get that bird back. When both Judy and Jen get back in the house, they start kind of yelling at each other for how they handled that. Judy doesn't appreciate the lie that Jen told because she feels like when Charlie does find out the truth, he's going to hate her even more. But the way that Jen looks at it, this lie is way better than the truth. There's then a knock at the door, and they get a little spooked because it's Detective Perez and Nick. Although they're not there for the Steve Woods situation. They do bring it up, but they're there to get their statements regarding the hit and run. Before they get the statements, they do let them know that Steve Woods' body was found on federal land, which means it's now an FBI issue. They then split up to get the statements, with Perez going with Jen and Nick staying with Judy. Judy doesn't really give Nick much to go on. She's pretty vague. But Nick's worried. He has a hunch that all of this is connected. Steve Woods, the Greeks, her hit and run. So he wants her to keep on the lookout for anybody who looks suspicious, if she might be followed, anything like that. In the kitchen, though, it's a much different conversation between Jen and Perez. Jen asks Perez, there's got to be something you can do to help me, but she says, no, I could lose everything. No, you're on your own with this one. But Jen reminds Perez that she tried to do the right thing. She tried to turn herself in, and it was Perez who stopped her from doing so. So Perez is in this whether she likes it or not. And Perez reluctantly says, all right, fine, I'll see what I can do. Once both police leave, the two women fill each other in on what they were discussing with the detectives. Jen gets pretty close to telling Judy about the cancer, but Charlie interrupts by getting something to drink. And Judy lets him know, your birthday cupcakes are almost ready. But he looks at her and says, I don't want your stupid cupcakes, and walks out. He's still pissed. They then hear somebody pull up in the driveway, and when they go outside to see who it is, it's Lorna in a brand new car for Charlie for his birthday, which doesn't sit well with Jen at all. Judy was planning on buying Charlie that Kia, but this car's way better. Lorna makes mention that Ted would have loved to be there to see Charlie get his first car. And then she looks at Judy and says, you know, you never get over losing a husband or a father or a son. You wouldn't know. And Lorna has no idea how hurtful that comment is. Judy gets so upset that she walks into the house, and Jen goes after her to make sure she's okay, but she's not. That comment really hurt. It's also not helping that Charlie, not knowing the truth about what happened to his father, is just eating her up. She really wants to tell Charlie the truth. It's Jen, though, that tells her, look, I get you want to tell him, but Charlie has to be in the right place, and that's not right now. Jen then gets up to go look for the bird in Henry's room. But as she's going up the steps, she slips and falls and hurts herself, and there's an untimely knock at the door, but this time it's Ben. He's brought a care package for Jen, and when he sees her lying on the floor, he decides to pick her up and take her to her room. Both Judy and Ben start trying to take care of Jen, make sure she's comfortable. Ben tells Jen that he's sorry about the accident. She tells him that she's sorry about Steve. But as for how he's doing, it's still difficult. You know, he had his issues with his brother, but it's always tough losing a family member. He tells both women that, you know, it's weird to say, but I just don't know who I am without him. As they're trying to give Ben a little bit of advice, Henry finally walks in. This is the first time Henry is seeing his mom, so he's a little concerned, but they let him know that she was in an accident and they don't know who did it. A little bit awkward for Ben. So much so that he has to excuse himself into the bathroom where he just needs to splash some water on his face and look in the mirror. When he does, though, all he can see is Steve's face. He eventually leaves the bathroom and he runs into Henry. Henry tells him, I'm sorry about your brother. My mom told me, and losing somebody sucks. But it does get easier. He then gives Ben a hug, and he also gives him the bird. Same bird that was used to kill Steve. Later that night, it's finally time to have that uncomfortable cancer talk. But it's actually Judy that brings it up to Jen. Because when Judy was going through Jen's purse to find something, she found the pamphlets, and she figures that it's Jen who has cancer. This forces Jen to break the news to her that, no, I don't have it, I'm fine. It might actually be you. And if there's one person that could spin a cancer diagnosis or the possibility of one, it would be Judy Hale. Even Judy, though, is having trouble with this. It's a complete shock, and she tries to put on a good face, but, you know, it's tough. She then goes downstairs to finish up the cupcakes for the birthday boy. Charlie walks in the room, and when Judy asks to talk, he just blurts out, how did you guys meet? Forces Judy to make up a story about meeting him quickly. It happened so fast. It was a one-time thing. Deep down, though, she really does want to tell Charlie the actual truth. At the end of her apology, Charlie grabs a cupcake, so it seems like he's forgiven her. For now, at least. Upstairs, though, Jen is tucking Henry in, and she decides to ask him about the bird and where it is. But that's when he reveals that he gave it away to Ben. And Ben has taken it to a bar and is kind of just drinking by himself with his thoughts. But his phone rings and it's his Uber ride. So he gets up to leave and he accidentally leaves the bird back at the bar. Which is unfortunate because he was being watched the whole time by Nick. You don't know if Nick was tailing him or he just happened to be in that bar, but Nick grabs the bird and keeps it. In episode 3, Judy and Jen head to the oncologist. And it's actually Jen who's way more on edge than Judy. I mean, Judy's nervous, but Jen yelling at the nurse because it's taking so long until finally Jen gets a phone call that, thankfully for the nurse, pulls her away. It's Detective Perez. She needs to talk immediately, and the two meet up. Perez shows her what the FBI found, which is a chunk of wood in Steve's skull. Immediately, Jen knows that it's the tail to the bird. But when Perez asks, okay, where is this bird now? Jen has to reveal that she doesn't have it on her person, but she can get it, not to worry. Perez tells her that she needs to get it back and get rid of it immediately. The FBI agent that's on this case is named Moranis, and he's really, really good. It happens to be the same FBI agent that Judy went to deal with the Greek situation. But this whole situation, helping Jen out, all of that, has got Detective Perez very, very paranoid. Of course, the actual location with the bird is in the possession of Nick, who goes to give it back to Ben. Ben is dealing with a tough time. Not only is he going through the grieving process, but so is his mother, and she's going through a tough time as well. To make it worse for Ben, when he goes out in the garage, he sees the car that he knows now hit and ran Judy and Jen. He also can't help but hear his brother yell at him that he was going to drink and drive, and how he was a loser, and now he's thinking that maybe Steve was onto something and maybe Steve was right. He snaps out of it, covers up the car, and that's when Nick shows up, and it gets Ben pretty skittish. Nick then explains why he's there, and he holds up the bird. And he also swears that it was broken when he found it, which Ben confirms, yeah, I know it was. Nick then has a conversation about Ben even being at the bar, how he looked. He's seen it before. He gives Ben his card and says, look, man, if you ever want to go to a meeting, just let me know. I've been where you are now. It never ends well, so just give me a call if you need help. Ben really appreciates it, and then Nick says, hey, I'm sorry what happened to your brother. I really wish I could help with the case, but they got me on this hit and run with Judy and Jen. It's unfortunate because Ben had finally gotten a little bit comfortable, but now he's back to being on edge. He asks Nick, you have any leads? And Nick says, no car, no crime. He then wraps up the conversation and says, all right, man, just take care of yourself. A little while later, Judy leaves the doctor's office. She went through her scans. She even bought a new necklace from the gift shop, but she doesn't find out the results until later that day. She calls up Jen and asks her what happened with Perez, and Jen fills her in. When Judy finds out that Moranis is on the case, she's actually excited about it. She thinks he's a great guy, even though Jen gets pretty concerned about it. Jen then hangs up the phone and heads over to Ben's place. Ben, though, isn't there. His mom is. Even though Jen is looking for Ben, she did bring ice cream for Eileen to make her feel better. And when Jen sees the state of Eileen, she knows that she really needs it. So even with Ben not there, she decides to head in and just spend some time with her. Jen knows what it's like to grieve someone you love that's gone too soon, so she gives Eileen some tips and just seems like a friend to her. As Jen cheers up Eileen, Judy goes and heads to find Glenn. She has an idea of where he'll be. He stays at the same motel. Sure enough, that's where he is. They quickly get caught up on their personal lives, but the whole time, Judy is just doing reconnaissance trying to find out what Glenn might know. The excuse that she uses for even being there is that she thinks she's being followed. While she tries to come up with a story on this fake person who's following her, she does see the FBI folder of the Steve Woods case. She then starts to fish, telling Glenn Nick's theory that it's all connected. What happened to Steve, what happened to her. But putting this theory in Glenn's head was a smart move because he starts to think about it. He doesn't quite understand why the Greeks would come after Judy, but it is something he hadn't considered before. Even though Glenn is on the case, it's not something that either Nick or Detective Perez can just forget. Perez is offered to be the FBI Laguna liaison on the case, so she's obtained the autopsy report. She doesn't really want to show it to Nick, but it'd be fishy if she didn't, so she has to show Nick what she's got, which is the piece of wood that was found in Steve's skull. Luckily, Nick has no idea what it is either. But if he goes to any home goods store or hobby store, he's going to have an easy time finding it because that bird is readily available. So much so that Ben wants to fix it. So he goes and finds a bunch of matching birds at a store so that he can cut off one tail and replace it. The thing is, Ben doesn't know how to actually do any of that. He's not very crafty. So he goes and interrupts Judy, who is counting some more of her Steve money, and he asks her for help. Judy's pretty relieved that Ben just wanted her to fix it and didn't ask any more questions. But before he leaves, Ben does have one question. How's Jen doing? And Judy fills him in on the fact that it's just a really tough time right now. Jen, though, is nowhere to be found because she's gone to drive Henry to his Holy Harmonies practice. And a little while later, that's exactly where Ben finds her. Along with Judy's help, he was able to fix the bird and he wants to give it back to Henry. He also wants to thank Jen because whatever she said to his mom really helped. She finally showered and she seems to be doing better, so he really appreciates that. The fact, though, that Jen has the bird back in her possession is a big relief. I wish I could say the same thing about Judy. Because as Jen is getting the bird back, Judy is getting the phone call from the oncologist that lets her know that they did, in fact, find cancer. But typical Judy Hale, she feels bad for the person who has to deliver the news and not herself. When Jen returns home, she finds Judy drinking some wine, and she thanks her because she shows her the bird that she has. The conversation gets pretty emotional, though, because Jen gets really upset at the thought of losing Judy. She starts telling her that she wouldn't be able to forgive herself if Judy actually got sick because she would blame herself. With Jen crying in front of her, Judy can't bring herself to tell her the news, so she lies, telling her, "You have nothing to worry about. I'm healthy. It came back clean." That's a big relief to Jen. They both enjoy some wine, and then they take care of that bird, burning it and getting rid of the ashes. As Jen is throwing out the ashes, though, she notices a suspicious car that's parked down the block with somebody in it. She thinks about what Perez was telling her about being tailed. She does find it fishy. She probably should, because Glenn's in that car, although Jen can't see him. In episode 4, Jen gets ready for Steve's funeral. She's actually to go. She's going to go with Judy, but Judy, before she goes, has to visit with the oncologist for the first time. The doctor explains to Judy that she's got cervical cancer, and she gives her options, which is basically chemotherapy. Judy's in a little bit of denial because she feels fine. She thinks that there might have been a mistake on the scans, but there was no mistake, and the doctor tries to explain that. After she leaves the doctor's office, she goes and meets up with Jen at the funeral. Jen, though, is under the impression that Judy has car troubles. That's what Judy told her. In order to get some free time to go to the oncologist, she told her that she had to take her car to the mechanic. So Jen asks her, "Do I have to take you to work?" And Judy says, "Oh, no. Mechanic said my car's fine." Jen thinks something's up with Judy, but Judy says, "Yeah, I mean, this is awful. We're at a funeral." As they both are discussing whether or not they should just sneak out of there, Ben walks up and thanks him for coming. While Ben is holding up okay, his mother is not. His mother is standing at the casket just screaming. Eventually, Eileen pulls it together, and both Eileen, Ben, along with Ben's father, greet mourners at the casket and thank him for coming. Eventually, this includes Judy and Jen, although they're surprised when they actually get to the casket because there's just a suit in there. The body was too decomposed, so it couldn't be displayed. Lorna walks up and explains to him that the body was just too far gone. But the thing that Lorna is most upset about isn't the fact that she's at a funeral or the fact that Steve even died. It's the fact that Eileen is no longer selling the house, which means she loses out on that big commission. Jen wants to get the hell out of the conversation with Lorna pretty quickly, so she walks up to Eileen, and Eileen thanks her for coming, but tells her that Ben's going through a really tough time. Even though he's putting on a strong face, he could really use a friend. Even though Jen really wants to leave, she doesn't. She seeks Ben out. She finds him inside the house, and they make small talk. Turns out Ben is not going back home. The FBI asks him to stick around while they go through the case. He then introduces Jen to his father. But when his dad asks Ben to go get him a drink, which leaves Jen alone with him, Ben's dad grabs her ass and it gets awkward, so she gets the hell out of there. She starts looking throughout the house for the bathroom, but every door is locked. And when she finally finds one that's unlocked, she walks through it, and it's a room full of dolls. Creepy-looking dolls. And unfortunately, the door closes, and she's locked in. It forces her to call Ben up, and Ben knows where she is right away. Steve walks in and explains the creepy dolls that his mom collected them. They're all twin dolls. They have no idea whether she bought them as a set or just collected them separately, but yeah, it's a weird hobby. With a lull in the conversation, Jen asks Ben, "How you doing?" And he says, "I'm not exactly living my best life here. I mean, I've been trying to keep it together for my parents, but I don't know how much longer I can do that." She tells him that he probably needs to let it out, and then she shows him her tactic for doing that, listening to hardcore music. As they sit in Jen's car listening to death metal, he doesn't really get the same cathartic release as she does. He decides to play her some of his music, which is horrible, and they just have a good laugh about the differences in style. Jen then gives Ben some more tips on how to deal with grief. But the thing that's really weighing him down is the fact that he hasn't told Jen that he hit her. So he finally comes clean, telling her that he was the one driving the day of the hit and run. Instead of getting angry, though, she just kisses him, and the two end up hooking up in her car. Now, Judy had gotten the okay to dip out of that wake, so she headed off to work. She ends up getting fired, though, because when she showed up, she saw Flo arguing with a nurse about letting her out of the building. Judy felt guilty, so she decided to sneak her out. What she didn't realize was Flo is immunocompromised. There's a reason why she was kept in that building. So Judy put her in real danger. It caused her boss to have to fire her on the spot. Michelle, who has been blowing Judy off, runs out and asks Judy, all right, did she take anything else? And Judy fills her in on everything that Flo ate that day or drank that day. They then have to deal with the awkwardness of the fact that Judy has been reaching out to Michelle and Michelle hasn't responded. And Michelle tells her, yeah, I got your text. I just didn't respond. Gets even more awkward, so Judy apologizes for everything she did to Flo, telling Michelle that she hopes she's going to be okay. And she gets ready to leave, but Michelle says, my mom's going to be fine. She actually had the time of her life today with you, so I should thank you. It starts back up a conversation between the two about how Michelle's doing with everything. And she tells Judy, I'm falling apart at the seams over here. She's stressed out. She's not sleeping. And what she needs is a distraction. So Judy says, do you want to go hang out? They head over to Michelle's place, and Michelle reads some tarot cards for Judy, which gets a little weird because one of the cards is the card of death. Michelle tells her that she thinks the card was probably meant for her because her restaurant closed the week before. It's not all bad news, though. She's got a possibility to move up to Sonoma and open up her own restaurant. And the thought of that is extremely exciting, but she can't bring herself to leave her mom at the moment. And Judy's advice is, you gotta live your own life. Your mom would want that for you. Not too long after, these two end up hooking up. As they're enjoying some pillow talk, Michelle tells Judy, I didn't know how badly I needed tonight. There's a little bit of silence, and then Judy tells Michelle, I have cancer. But when she looks over, Michelle is dead asleep. So for the time being, she's still the only one who knows. The good news is everybody in the show is finally getting laid, so that's a positive. In episode 5, both Judy and Jen wake up next to the person they slept to, and everybody seems like they had a really good time. Michelle has to run. Her mom has a cardiologist appointment, and Judy tells her, if you ever need anything, you know where I live. Ben's pillow talk is a little bit different. It starts off good, but then he brings up Steve, and it gets a little bit awkward. Jen tells him all about the Greek group that she went to, and she didn't like it at first, but it did seem to help, and she suggests that maybe he check it out. Ben then gets up to take a bath, which, yes, is a little weird, and Charlie walks in. So Charlie knows what went down last night. He finds it very amusing. But the reason he barged right in is because there's a leak in their ceiling. It seems to be right above the tub. Ben offers to go take a look, see if he can figure it out, and he asks Charlie if he can help out. He wanted to get Charlie alone privately so he could apologize for the other day, showing up absolutely blitzed. Charlie tells him that he still hasn't told anybody, including his mom, and Ben really appreciates that. He says, I'm not that guy. Charlie completely gets it because he did some messed up things after his dad died, so all's forgiven. As for the whole issue with the pipes, Ben's never seen anything like it. There's a huge hole in one of the pipes, like something just corroded and burned right through it. Probably was that dead rat that Jen decided to drop in there and burn. Unfortunately, it's above Ben's pay grade. He can't fix it, so they're going to have to get a professional. While all of this is happening, Judy has an appointment with her doctor. Her doctor explains the rounds of chemo, what she could expect. It's all pretty depressing stuff. As soon as she gets back to Jen's, Jen asks her, where have you been? I'm freaking out. Turns out Ben was the one that hit us. Oh, and we slept together, which was good, but it's also bad because he's upstairs trying to fix the leak in our pipes. Judy blurts out, maybe this isn't the best time to tell you what I was going to tell you. And right away, Jen says, well, what were you going to tell me? Judy was going to tell her about the cancer diagnosis, but instead, she says, I have to go up to Sonoma with Michelle for 3 months. She's opening up a winery and a restaurant, and she wants me to spruce it up. Jen's a little confused about that because, after all, Michelle and Judy dated for all of, a week. But Judy just runs with this lie and makes it a little bit believable. Ben then comes downstairs and sees Judy and asks Jen, did you tell her? Jen confirms that she did, and Ben gets super emotional, apologizing to Judy the same way he did to Jen, without the hooking up part. Ben is clearly not doing great. So Judy and Jen decided to take him to one of those grief groups, and boy, does he let it out. After Ben shares a little bit with the group, Yolanda explains that it's a special day for her because it's the 20th anniversary of Bert's death. She usually goes to their favorite karaoke bar to celebrate his life, but unfortunately that closed, so she doesn't really have any plans. But Judy's not going to let her spend this day alone. She asks Jen, doesn't Henry have that karaoke machine? And in fact, he does. So the entire grief group is coming over that night to enjoy some karaoke and celebrate the life of Bert. This isn't exactly something that Jen really wants to do. She just currently has a lot on her plate. And this includes the FBI. But Judy tells her, don't worry about that. I talked to Glenn. I was able to imply that the Greeks were involved in our hit and run, which implies that they were the one that killed Steve because he was stealing money from them after all. Jen doesn't see this as being a good thing, though. She could see this backfiring and Moranis looking more at them than he previously was planning on. But what it really boils down to is Jen is pissed off that Judy is just leaving for 3 months. A couple hours later, everybody shows up and everybody's enjoying karaoke, especially Yolanda. Yolanda, though, gets so emotional after she sings that she just needs a moment to herself. Judy sees what happened, so she goes and grabs her a glass of water. They start talking about Bert, the guy he was, how ordinary he was, but how perfect he was for Yolanda. Yolanda is still really hurt about the fact that Bert took his own life and never asked for help. Right before she heads out, she really thanks Judy for setting all of this up. She truly appreciates it. Henry, though, interrupts the conversation by opening the door and telling Judy that her friend is here. Michelle has shown up, completely out of the blue. When Jen sees her, she says, "Oh, I heard about Sonoma," very confrontationally. But Judy steps in and just tries to stop that because, of course, Michelle has no idea about this proposed trip. Michelle and Judy then go off and talk in private. Michelle apologized for just showing up like this, but she wanted to apologize. Something has been really eating at her. She heard what Judy said in bed the other night. She pretended to be asleep, and the fact that she pretended to be asleep was such a big reveal, she just feels like a real shitty person for doing that. Judy tries to tell her that it's fine, it's okay, but Michelle says, no, it's not okay. You don't have to talk about it, but if you need somebody, I'm here. Judy tells Michelle that she'll be okay. She's got Jen. And Michelle tells her, well, if there's anything I can do for you, just let me know. And Judy says, yeah, you can invite me to Sonoma when you open up your new restaurant. It's interesting she brought it up because Michelle actually talked to her mom that day about that very topic. And her mom was really supportive about it. Michelle wasn't the only one to make an impromptu visit, though. So did Ben. And unfortunately, he's blitzed again. As Judy is talking to Michelle, Jen is asking Ben, what are you doing here? And the reason why Ben is so blitzed is because they talked to the FBI and they found out that Steve drowned. And it's really awkward because Ben is telling her this right in front of the pool that Steve died in. It gets even worse when Ben drops the bottle of wine he was drinking into the pool and then falls in. It was a bottle of red, so it brings back a lot of flashbacks to the night that Steve actually died. Takes a little bit, but both Judy and Jen are able to get Ben out of the pool and into the house. They sit him down and go get him some towels and whatnot, and Charlie comes in and sees a drunk Ben sitting at his kitchen counter, and he starts screaming at him saying, I thought you weren't that guy. You need to own up to your stuff and stay away from my mom. This dose of reality from Charlie does hit home with Ben. He knows he needs to do something. So he goes to Nick and he asks for help. And Nick gets him checked into a rehab facility. As they're actually walking out to go get Ben some help, Nick says, hey, by the way, if you don't mind me asking, where did you get that bird? And Ben tells him it was Henry, Jen's son. Judy made it for him. And Nick finds that very interesting. Back at Jen's, both her and Judy start talking, and Jen fills Judy in on the fact that Steve drowned, and she starts beating herself up all over again for being a terrible person, for even keeping Ben around even after she killed his brother. So Judy decides to change the conversation by telling Jen that she has cancer. She explains everything. And Jen is pissed off, but not so much at Judy, more about the news that she just got. Jen assures her that she will be there for her during this time. No matter what she needs, Jen will be there. The next day, Jen proves how dedicated she is to all this by making a detailed schedule of all of Judy's doctor's appointments. But as they're discussing this and Henry and Shandy are walking in, the leak finally gives way. The tub crashes through the ceiling and now it's on the first floor. So Jen has that to deal with. In episode 6, Judy's about to go in for her first treatment and it's got Jen completely on edge. She sits both Charlie and Henry down and tells them both, I need your help on this. This is an all-hands-on-deck situation, so I need you to step up with her in treatment. As if she didn't have enough stuff on her plate, Henry hands her a bunch of papers and says, are you still going to help me make my cranes for Christ? Jen now has to make 1,000 paper cranes. Henry's big concern, though, is Judy. He asks his mom, is she going to be okay? And his mom says, yeah, we're doing all the right things. She should be okay. She then gets in the car and drives Judy to her first treatment. Judy's in pretty good spirits, as expected. She's also trying a bunch of alternative medicines because, hey, why not? But Judy gets really upset when she mentions how after the chemo, she's probably going to go into menopause, which means she's never going to have a kid. And Jen tries to make her feel better by saying, well, I'm going through menopause right now, so I'll be right there with you. But it doesn't really make Judy feel any better. They get to the hospital, they strap Judy in the chair, and she gets ready to do this thing. It's going to be weeks of this. Chemo, feeling crappy, but Jen has plans to be there the entire time. And to repay her, Judy has plans to help Jen out with making those paper cranes. After her first round of chemo, she is in fact feeling pretty crappy. She's staying in Charlie's room for the time being, and Charlie brings her some tea. They start making a little bit of small talk, and then Charlie notices all of the medicine that she has to take. One has definitely caught his eye. It's the gummies. Judy tells him, I'm not going to really notice if a few go missing. But even though Judy is trying to put on a strong face, she feels like crap. Days turn into weeks, weeks turn into a couple months. And next thing you know, Judy has finished 1,000 paper cranes and chemotherapy. During all of the chemotherapy, Detective Perez has been trying to get in touch with Jen, though. That's because Nick has been able to figure out where that piece of wood came from. He showed up at Detective Perez's desk and dumped a bunch of wooden birds on the table. Detective Perez tried to brush it off and say that she didn't see the similarities, but clearly Nick is onto something. In order to kind of get him off the scent, she tells him that she'll be the one to take all of this information to Detective Moranis. But in the meantime, he's supposed to focus on finding the driver of the hit and run. Way easier said than done. I mean, Nick is just sitting at a computer looking at security cam footage over and over and over again. All that hard work pays off, though, because he does find something interesting. It looks like the hit and run vehicle, and Charlie was the one who was driving it. Back over with Perez, though, she finally is able to get in touch with Jen, and when they meet up, she is not happy. She feels like Jen's been blowing her off. She just isn't aware of the current situation. She shows it to Jen and says, I'm supposed to give this to the FBI. Apparently a little gal pal is running around handing out birds. I mean, I didn't, but that doesn't mean they're not going to figure it out on their own. If Nick can figure it out, they will. Jen starts crying, telling Perez, I don't care if they figure it out. Let them figure it out. And as Perez is ripping into her, finally Jen says, Judy has cervical cancer. Jen starts just bearing her soul to Perez about how scared she is that she's going to lose Judy. And how all of this has been bottled up because she can't let Judy see her like this. Instead of saying anything, Detective Perez just sits in the car and listens. When she gets out of the car, she picks up Judy, and she takes her home because Judy just finished 3 months of chemo. It's quite an accomplishment, and it's one that Jen wants to celebrate, but Judy can't because her nurse ended up dying of a heart attack, so she's pretty emotional. No matter how much Jen tries to cheer up Judy, Judy just isn't really willing to be cheery. So Jen tries an alternative method. Judy had all of those different kinds of medicines, and that included mushrooms. So Jen takes some. She convinces Judy to take some. And a little while later, they're both tripping balls. These two are having a great time. But when Jen goes to the bathroom, Judy gives her some advice. Whatever you do, don't look in the mirror. And Jen doesn't follow it. And when she looks in the mirror, she sees her mom, who died of cancer, staring back at her. It freaks her out so much that she comes out of the bathroom and says to Judy, you got to take me to the hospital. I'm having a heart attack. Of course, Judy can't take her to the hospital. She's also on shrooms. So that leaves Charlie to take her to the hospital. And Charlie's reveling in the fact that he has to take his adult mother to the hospital because she's the one on drugs. As Charlie and Jen head to the hospital, Judy has to watch Henry. She doesn't come right out and say to Henry, hey, your mom's going to the hospital because she's tripping balls. She just tells him that his mom has to go out for a bit. And that's the reason why she's the one doing the tuck-in for the night. She then gives him the 1,000 paper cranes that she made him. And it's something that Henry really, really appreciates. He knew his mom didn't want to do it and probably wouldn't have done it. So the fact that they got done is something that he wasn't really expecting. She asks him, what are you going to do with all these? And he says, well, I'm supposed to make a wish. He's supposed to wish for Christ's return, but he wants to use the wish on Judy to make sure that she's okay. And that's because Judy's like his second mom. She is really, really touched by this comment. But his actual mom is getting some interesting news. She's checked into the hospital and she's not having a heart attack. But she is pregnant, 4 months pregnant. In episode 7, Judy has a new lease on life. She feels great after 3 months of feeling crappy. She's done with chemo and she feels amazing. She heads to the doctor's where she's painted her a picture as a thank you gift, but she gets a little bit of bad news. The doctor tells her that this is only the first round of chemo. They're going to go and do a scan and see if she reacted to the chemo, and if she did, great. She doesn't have to go through a second round, but odds are she's going to have to go through a second round of chemo. Most people do. And Judy just wasn't expecting that. She thought this would be a 3-month stretch, and then that's it. She's cured. And now she's learning that she'll probably have to go in for another 3 months. Being sick for 3 more months isn't really appealing to Judy at all. It's also not that appealing to Jen. She goes and has a doctor's visit, and she just can't understand how in the world she's pregnant. Sure, she felt things, but she just figured it was the menopause. And the doctor lets her know that, yeah, she is going through menopause, but that doesn't mean she still can't get pregnant. The good news is the baby looks healthy, but right now Jen doesn't want to hear anything about a baby. All she wants to do is go back in time and not have sex with Ben. For the time being, she's planning on keeping it a secret. So much so that she stops off and gets a hideous-looking poncho to wear to cover up her little bit of a baby bump that she's already sporting. When she gets home, Judy has made her a thank you gift for helping her get through chemo. It's a wine flight. Of course, Jen can't drink wine. She's pregnant. And she also doesn't want to tell Judy about it. And the fact that Jen doesn't want to drink, Judy thinks that it's because Jen is not drinking in solidarity of Ben being in rehab. But Jen says, no, it has nothing to do with that. I just want to focus on my health right now. She's a really bad liar. They then start talking about what they're doing that day, and Jen has to get ready to show a house. It's actually for her neighbor, Karen. Jeff and Karen have split up, and while Jeff is taking it in stride, Karen is not. You hate to see a young romance die so quickly, but they're selling the house. Jen is in charge of showing it. And all the while, the only thing Jen can think of is this baby that she doesn't want to have, and the fact that she's worried people are going to figure out that she's pregnant. After all, who's rocking a poncho in Laguna Beach? It's actually more impressive she even found a poncho, but I digress. As if her day can't get bad enough, Jen gets a little bout of nausea, and she steps out of the house to just puke in a bush, and there's Ben, standing there looking at her. He's fresh out of rehab, and he's ready to do his reconciliation of the 12-step program. Even though both Judy and Jen tell him that it's not even worth doing that, it's fine, everything's forgiven, he still feels like he needs to apologize. He then lets him know that he's planning on moving back up north. He's got to get back to that life. He's now realizing there was a reason he left Laguna in the first place. There's just a lot of bad memories. This would be a good time for Jen to pull him aside and tell him that he's going to be a dad again, because he already has a son in college, but she doesn't do that. They just tell him that they're really going to miss him. Judy asks Ben, are you sure that you really have to go? And he tells them, I'd only be staying out of obligation to my parents, so there's not really any other reason to stay. Ben was probably trying to fish around for Jen to say something, convince him to stay, but she doesn't. She stays quiet. And once Ben leaves, Judy yells at her for that, saying he was clearly trying to get you to say something, but you didn't. You were supposed to be the one to convince him to stay, but you just stayed quiet. Jen tries to act like there's nothing going on between the two, but Judy reminds her that Jen did say his name twice when she was tripping. She also had sex with him twice, so there's definitely something going on. They get in an argument about whether or not Jen loves him. Jen saying she doesn't, and Judy saying, I just don't believe you. Jen tells Judy, I can't even look at him. I killed his brother. Judy reminds Jen that his brother killed her husband, but Jen says, yeah, he doesn't know that. And Judy says, well, maybe he should. What if we just told him the truth about everything? Don't you think he could forgive you? And Jen does not think that Ben will forgive her. Judy starts reminding Jen about how they told each other the truth. And yeah, they went through a rough patch, but it worked out because that's what friends do. Jen thinks about it and agrees with it, so she tells Judy how she's pregnant. This comes as quite a surprise, especially when she starts putting the puzzle pieces together and realizes that it's Ben's child. Judy tries to spin this in a normal, positive way, but she struggles to do that. It's obvious that Judy is upset and hurt. She knows that now she'll never have a child, and here's a woman that she's friends with who's also going through menopause, and she happens to be pregnant, and she doesn't want it. It's just tough for Judy to swallow that pill. Judy excuses herself because she needs a minute. And a little bit later, Jen gets a text from Perez that they need to meet. Nick showed Perez what he found, the picture of Charlie driving what he thinks is the hit-and-run vehicle. Perez tries to dispel this theory, saying it really doesn't make sense. Why would he try to hurt his own mother? But the way Nick pieces it together, maybe the target wasn't his mother. Maybe it was Judy Hale because Judy was in the car that killed his father. It was retribution. And if you look at what happened with Steve Wood, it might have been Charlie all along. Even though Perez continues to dispel the theory, the way that Nick looks at it, Charlie had motive, and now he had opportunity to do it. He then asks Perez if she ever heard back from Agent Moranis about the wooden bird, but she says, no, never did. And Nick finds that super weird. He suggests that maybe he go follow up, but Perez says, no, don't. We should just bring Charlie in. She doesn't want Nick to go with, though. She wants to talk to Jen alone, so she tasks Nick with isolating the plates on the footage. She then met up with Jen and shows Jen the picture of Charlie, and Jen tells her emphatically, Charlie did not hit us. Perez, though, isn't so convinced. I mean, the evidence is pretty clear. But when Perez threatens to pull Charlie downtown and press charges against him, Jen finally comes clean that it was Ben, but says she's not pressing charges, no harm, no foul, and he's sorry about it, so just let him go. Through Jen's explanation on why they shouldn't arrest Ben, Perez is able to discern that Ben must have been drinking. So drinking and driving, yeah, she's got to do something about that. Jen begs Perez not to do anything about it, but Perez screams, I can't. I'm not your sorority sister, I'm a cop. Perez then starts trying to convince Jen on why she should press charges, and Jen blurts out, it's because I'm pregnant. That does change things quite a bit. When Jen leaves Perez's car, she goes to check on Judy, and she apologizes for everything. It's not like Jen went out and got pregnant on purpose, but she still feels bad for her friend. And Judy says, don't apologize. They start talking about the pregnancy, and Jen's really concerned because she feels like she can't do it alone. She tells Judy, if you want to repay me for helping you through chemo, help me through this. I can't tell Ben. It just wouldn't be fair. Judy tells her, Ben deserves to know all of it, and then maybe he can process it. Maybe that can lead to you guys having a life together. But Jen already has a life, and she's comfortable. They then kind of go their separate ways and go do their own thing, and later that night, as Jen is hanging out with the boys, Judy walks in. She tells Jen that she's thought of a better way to repay her, because odds are she's not going to be there to help her out throughout this whole process. After all, she does have stage 4 cancer. So she went over to Ben's place and convinced him to stay. Judy didn't tell Ben that he's going to be a father, but Ben was keeping a secret. He tells Jen that the night that Ted died, he had something to do with it. He was involved because they were driving him home. He was drunk and he was in the back seat when they hit Ted. Deep down, Ben takes full responsibility for the death of Ted. If he wasn't drunk and they didn't drive him home, Ted is still alive. Ben came over because he doesn't want any secrets between them, and Jen agrees. She's about to tell Ben about the fact that he's going to be a father, but that's when Perez and Nick show up and arrest him. It gives Nick no pleasure that he has to do this. He looks at Ben as a friend, but he has to arrest him. Perez didn't want to do this, but Nick kind of made an impassioned speech about how he was being sidelined by Perez, and he didn't appreciate it. He looked at it like Perez thought he was a bad cop. So Perez ended up giving him a little bit of insight, and that insight was that Ben was the one who was driving that day. Perez apologizes to Jen, and then they take Ben in. In episode 8, Jen heads down to the police precinct and wants to have a conversation with Perez about getting Ben freed. She thought they had an understanding after they talked in the car privately, but apparently not, and she's not happy about it. She tries to blackmail Detective Perez because, after all, Perez knows what happened to Steve Wood, but that doesn't go all that well either. Perez pulls Jen outside to have a bit of a more private conversation and explains to her that she shouldn't be barging in there making veiled threats. Perez tells Jen that Ben isn't going to do all this hard time that she thinks he is. After all, he's a white male in Laguna for a DUI hit and run. But she also tells her that Ben should be the least of her concern because they found DNA on Steve's body. And while they don't know whose DNA it is, it's not going to take long for Jen's DNA to probably show up. Jen asks Perez, what do we do? And Perez says, there's no more we. Not anymore. You're on your own with this. And gets up and walks away. When Jen gets home, she fills Judy in on exactly what Perez told her, and they start trying to talk this out, figure out what they can do. One of the things she thought of is just turning herself in, thinking that maybe if she just owned up to it, she would get some leniency. But Judy says, I don't think it works like that. And now Jen's worried that she could have a nervous breakdown. Judy's suggestion is just to stay calm. After all, they don't know what they found, and the FBI could have nothing. But the way that Jen looks at it, they could have something, though, and then what? Jen really wants to get a lawyer, and Judy's suggestion is just to go on vacation. Jen thinks that's crazy, just running away. Especially considering that Judy has to go back for her scans. Judy, however, says that she can just do that next week. The reality of the situation is, the oncologist has called multiple times to schedule the scans, and Judy has just sent them straight to voicemail. She doesn't really have any interest in doing the scans. But Judy is pretty dead set on this whole vacation plan. She tells Jen that Steve has a place in Mexico and they can just go there. This does sound like a nice idea, and Jen starts thinking that maybe a little bit of a vacation could do them both some good. She then has to get ready because she's showing Karen's open house that day. The open house doesn't go as expected because Karen actually shows up and she's really emotional. But one person who shows up at the open house is Agent Moranis. He didn't show up because he's looking for a house. He showed up to talk to Jen. Jen tells Moranis to just wait until after the open house and then they can head on over to her place and have this conversation. And they walk in to find Judy, whose bags are already packed. And Judy's as surprised to see Moranis as Jen was, although Judy is way better at playing it off. He just has some simple questions like what was the relationship with Steve Wood, because after all, she was his real estate agent for a little bit. He also has questions as to how much money the condos went for. It seems like he's starting to buy into the whole Greek mafia having an influence on everything. But he also wants to know why she had a parking ticket for just outside the very park where they found Steve's body. And it's Judy who walks in and saves the day by saying they were up there for a girls' weekend. And it wasn't just them, it was with their buddy Jeff. As Moranis is sucking down a scone, he seems to buy the whole story. But once he leaves, Jen is freaking out a little bit. I mean, they did say that they had a girls' weekend with Jeff, and Jeff wasn't there, and Jeff doesn't know anything about it. She then starts freaking out even more when she can't find the mug that she was drinking. She starts getting so convinced that Moranis took it as evidence, looking to get her DNA and her fingerprints. They start thinking about what they're going to do about this, and as Judy says, we check the dining room, Jen says at the same time, we kill Glenn. They can make it look like an accident. They just take those pills that Judy stole from the hospital, they crush a bunch of them up, and they put them in a scones recipe and feed it to him. All of it will look like an overdose. But as Jen is figuring out this master crime, Judy finds the mug, so no reason to kill Glenn. They then have to go make sure Jeff is on board with this whole corroboration. Lucky for them, Jeff has a terrible memory. He's lied so much that he just has trouble keeping his story straight. So when they feed him the story about going up for this girls' weekend, he believes it all. In fact, they even spin it so that he thinks they're doing him a favor with the FBI. That if the FBI comes calling, the girls will be the one having his back, not the other way around. Right before they leave, Jeff does tell Jen that even though she asked him to delete that footage from the cloud, he actually never did. He's been meaning to tell her, but it just slipped his mind, and now he just remembered. Karen reset the cloud password, so he never got a chance to do it. So that footage still exists, which is another thing they have to deal with. They're going to have to figure out a way to delete it. That night, they do so by heading over to Karen's and trying to be a, quote, friend to her in this time of mourning. She's still pretty hung up on Jeff. She really just sits in her safe room looking at old photos of him. So the girls convince her to delete the entire cloud for the past year. Just get rid of it all. She needs to move on with her life, but she doesn't know that by deleting everything, she's actually deleting that video that they want gone. They convince Karen to do it, they get her external hard drive, and then they finally head home. The next day, Judy finally decides to call the hospital and schedule her scan. As she's doing that in the other room, Jen is trying to sign her up for a clinical trial. In the middle of it, though, the doorbell rings, and it's Karen. She tells Jen that she found something disturbing on her camera. Right away, Jen thinks that it's going to be her, but it's not. It's actually Moranis. He was going through Jen's trash. He grabbed the bag that she threw out that night, the bag of the ashes, and he took it with him. Karen doesn't know that Moranis actually is an FBI agent. She just thinks that he's a creep who was looking at her house. But Jen now knows the severity of the situation. She knows it's only a matter of time before Moranis connects the dots, and she has to do something about it. So the next day, she shows up at Moranis' hotel room, and she's got a whole mess of scones for him. In episode 9, Jen sits down with Moranis, and as he's eating those scones, she tells him a story that she had an affair with Steve Wood. This covers her tracks a little bit, that if they find DNA on Steve and it's hers, it would explain a lot. She says that she didn't say this before because she didn't want Judy finding out. Moranis seems to buy it all, and he also really appreciates the scones. But when Jen leaves the room, Moranis is still very much alive. Jen leaves the hotel room, gets in her car, and as she's leaving, she sees these two guys in suits that smile at her, and they seem to be heading to Moranis' hotel room. She doesn't really think anything of it. She thinks that they might be just FBI, and she just goes about her business. When she gets home, she meets with Judy, and she doesn't say a word about meeting with Moranis, but she doesn't really have a chance to. Judy tells her that she got the scans, and unfortunately, she's terminal. Jen starts talking about how there gotta be another option, but Judy stops her and says, no. We always knew that the odds of the chemo working were always pretty low. It's okay. Really. I've accepted it. But Jen has not. She's not ready to give up on her friend just giving up and dying. She's now hell-bent on getting her friend into this clinical trial. Judy doesn't really have any interest in doing it, though. She already went through chemo, and that was hard. Clinical trial is going to be even harder. And if she's going to die, she doesn't want to spend the remaining time she has miserable sick. She wants to spend it happy. Jen, though, still is not ready to give up on her friend dying. Jen then tells Judy about what Karen showed her the previous night, Moranis scooping up her DNA. She also tells Judy not to worry about it because stress isn't good for the cancer. And Judy says, well, stress isn't good for the baby either. But they were both unaware that Charlie and Henry were walking in the room, and they heard that line. And it takes all of about 5 seconds for Charlie to realize that his mom is knocked up. After the initial shock of her children learning that she's 4 or 5 months pregnant, she goes to work, calling up the hospital and trying to get Judy into this clinical trial, but it's not working. And her bedside manner is worse than most doctors. She then gets a phone call from prison, and it's Ben. They make a little chit-chat about how he's holding up, but at no point does she tell him about the baby. As Jen is getting caught back up with Ben, Judy goes to visit her mother, who is actually out of prison, believe it or not. She wants to be able to say goodbye to her mother, but she also doesn't want to tell her mother that she has cancer. After a bit of small talk back and forth, she gives her mother an envelope with a bunch of cash in it and tells her that she's going away for a little bit. When her mom asks her, where are you going? She tells her, Sonoma. I'm helping a friend open up a restaurant. Judy then heads home and she starts rummaging through the guest house. Now, normally the guest house is where she is staying, but in this situation, she's taking over Charlie's room and Charlie's taking over the guest house. She starts looking through the safe and looking for the gun, and Charlie catches her. He thinks that she's just rummaging through his stuff, and he gets upset and even says, doesn't anyone in this family have any boundaries? But all that Judy heard was anyone in this family. And she likes the fact that Charlie thinks that she is a part of the family. He sits down and confides in her that he can't quite figure out his mom. She hated his dad, but she likes Ben. Judy tries to explain to Charlie that Jen is the kind of mother that he actually wants, and she would know firsthand having a pretty bad mom herself. At the end of this conversation, Judy gives him a hug and says, I love you. And Charlie says, I love you too. And that means so much to Judy. As Judy and Charlie are having a little bit of a heart-to-heart, Jen is dropping off the 1,000 paper cranes that Judy made for the Holy Harmony show. The mother that Jen drops it off to can't believe that Jen made it, and Jen admits, yeah, I didn't make it. My friend did when she was going through chemo. Well, it turns out that this mom is a doctor, and she knows people over at the hospital that's doing that clinical trial. She's going to make some phone calls and see if she can get Judy in. She's really excited about the possibility of getting Judy in. She calls Judy up when she gets home, but Judy doesn't answer. There's then a knock at the door, and Jen just figures that it's Judy, but it's not. It's Judy's mom. When Judy's mom opened up the package that Judy gave her and she saw all that money, she thought that something was up, that Judy was once again into some shady stuff, so she came looking for her. Judy's not there, so she sits down and she starts ripping Judy to Jen. Finally, Jen gets sick of it and tells Judy's mom, your daughter has cancer. Judy's mom takes a little bit to process this, asks Jen if she's going to be okay, but by Jen's face, she knows the answer's probably not. Now, Jen was busy picking up Henry, but when Henry walks in the door, he says, yeah, Judy's not with me. She had a bag packed and she just dropped me off and left. Jen immediately calls Judy's phone, but Judy left it behind. She also left a beautiful painting that she made. But Judy didn't go down to Mexico. She went to turn herself in. She tells Nick that it was her who was the one who killed Steve Wood. She figures that with terminal cancer, what does it even matter? She'll take the hit. It'll save Jen and her family. And it is one hell of a story, but Nick has to believe it because she just confessed to murder. Nick asks her, why didn't you just go to the FBI and try to strike a plea? And Judy tells him, I felt like it'd be better if I just told a friend. The good news is Judy does get one phone call, and she uses it to call up Jen. But when Jen gets to the precinct, she's pissed off. She can't believe that Judy did this. After all, they're in this thing together. She starts trying to convince Judy to go back on the word, but Judy says, no, I'm not going to do it. And it gets Jen even more upset. This sparks a pretty heated argument between the two. It goes from screaming to crying to pleading. And when Jen walks out, she's not willing to give up. She goes and talks to Nick, begging him to just arrest her in 3 weeks. Let her go through this clinical trial. And even though Nick likes Judy, he can't just let her go. But Jen is really convincing. And at the end of their conversation, Judy is able to go home, but with an ankle monitor. And 3 weeks after the clinical trial, she'll be arrested for murder. When they get back to Jen's house, Judy's mom is still there, and Judy's pretty surprised to see her. Judy's mom never tells Judy that she knows about the cancer. She words it as saying, I just wanted to give you a proper goodbye before you head off to Sonoma. Back at the police precinct, though, Nick comes clean to Perez, telling her what he did with Judy and explaining that he's probably going to have to resign, but if that makes him a bad person, then so be it. Perez, though, isn't asking for his resignation. But even with her not demanding it, he knows that his career is over if Moranis ever finds out. And that's when Perez says Moranis is never going to find out. Because Perez went to the motel that day, and what she found was a very dead Moranis and a ransacked room. They don't have any leads on who killed Moranis, how he died, who went through the room, but they no longer have to worry about him. And as for the FBI folder, Perez took that with her and decided to burn it. The next day, Judy and Jen should be heading to that clinical trial, but they don't. There's no plans on going to the clinical trial. They're going to have that vacation in Mexico, and they head over the border. And in the series finale, they cross over the border and they immediately start talking about all their regrets, the things that they didn't do. It's not like they're removed from reality, though. They know that they have 3 weeks down in Mexico. Then you've got a likely scenario of Judy heading to prison. But that's something that right now Jen just doesn't want to think about. They pull over because they have to go to the bathroom, though. As Jen is standing watch for Judy, they notice that another car is pulled up, and Jen recognizes the two guys. It's the same two guys that were walking towards Agent Moranis' hotel room. She figures they're FBI, but Judy says, no, they're not FBI, they're the Greeks. That's because Judy knows them. They've been tailing both of them for quite some time. They want the money that Steve stole. They've been able to figure out that if Steve stole the money from them, Judy must have stolen it from him. Judy, though, plays the cancer card, letting him know that she's got the big C, which does make them very sympathetic to her cause, but also letting him know that Jen is pregnant. So you've got a terminal woman and a pregnant woman. Killing both, not great optics. She then fakes a bout of nausea and begs them, just let me get my medicine. And when they do that, she pulls out the gun from the safe. She demands that they get back in the car. She shoots their tires out, and then Jen and Judy head off. A little while later, they arrive at Steve's Mexican cabin. There's nobody there, but they do find a house cat. They then start living their best life. Walking the beach, watching Mexican television, which is really just American reruns with bad dubs. But one morning, Jen wakes up and she panics because Judy's nowhere. When she finally finds Judy, Judy tells her that she just took the boat out on the water because the sunrise was beautiful. And Jen says, well, next time, can you just leave a note? I was freaking out. Judy then starts trying to convince Jen to go out on the water with her, and Jen definitely has no interest in doing that. She doesn't think it's safe, and Judy says, well, there are life vests in the garage. But when they go to the garage, what they find is a car, and it looks like it's the same exact car that hit Ted. Both women are very confused, but Judy figures that Steve must have gotten all the parts and put it back together. It's an extremely awkward situation for both of them. Judy offers Jen a golf club if she wants to smash it up because she must hate the thing, but Jen, holding back tears, says, how can I hate it? It brought me you. After a little bit of a hug, they head down to the water, and they never actually go in, but they do sit on a boat on the beach. That was the compromise they came to. Judy tells Jen all about her Uncle Paul, which really was just one of her mom's boyfriends. He's the one who taught her how to sail. And one day, he sailed out of their life. Paul and Judy's mom got into a fight, and she never saw him again. She's always wondered how he's doing, and if he thinks of her. She also always wondered if Paul was actually her real dad. Reality then hits both women because they only have a few days left, but Jen has come up with a plan. What if Judy died? I mean, she's going to die, but what if they tell the police that she died in the clinical trial? And then they both just stay there, in Mexico. Admittedly, Jen has not worked out all of the details for this, i.e. like getting Charlie and Henry down there, relocating the whole family, having the baby in Mexico. She's really just spitballing, but Judy tells her you can't do any of that. Jen wants to be with Judy the entire time, but Judy, crying at this point, says, no, I'm not going to be like your mother. I'm not going to let you see me suffer and put you through that. No. Judy does turn to Jen and say, you have to promise me, though, that you will not let that baby grow up without knowing who its father is. Trust me on this. As for the baby, though, they have a bigger issue than the baby's father. Jen starts bleeding. They have to rush to a Mexican hospital, and luckily, it turns out Judy speaks fluent Spanish. And that doctor tells Judy to tell Jen that she just has a condition and the baby is healthy and everything looks great. They'll have to do a couple follow-up visits, but while this is scary, it's nothing to be really alarmed about. They also learn that Jen is having a girl, which Jen is thrilled about. That's what she was hoping for. With only a few days left in Mexico, they decide to go out and have an authentic Mexican dinner that night. While Judy is sucking down a margarita, Jen is sucking down water in a margarita glass. Even with no alcohol, they seem to be having a great time, dancing the mariachi band. But in the middle of it, Jen gets a phone call from Ben. During this phone call, Jen finally decides to tell Ben that she's pregnant and the baby is his. He is beyond excited about this. He's thrilled. Ben didn't call, though, just to catch up with Jen. He called because he has some news. He found out that Agent Moranis died. This is great news for Judy and Jen, because the FBI thinks that the Greeks did it. They also think that the Greeks killed Steve as well, because in Moranis' room, it was completely ransacked and the file on Steve was missing. The point is, both women can go back and be fine. Judy reminds Jen, though, about that whole confession thing, but Jen thinks there's got to be a way around that. You just say you made it up, or the Greeks threaten to kill you, something. But Judy's health is rapidly deteriorating. She's just been really, really good at hiding it. Once Jen gets Judy in bed, she says, look, I don't want you to suffer. We'll figure this out once we get back. And that's when Judy has to tell Jen, I'm not going back. This is really, really tough for Jen to hear, but they start making plans to visit each other, see each other on weekends. As hard as it is for Jen to hear that her friend isn't coming back with her, she does understand it because the house is beautiful. They then start crying, telling each other how much they mean to each other, and then finally telling each other that they love each other. When Jen wakes up the next morning, Judy isn't there, but there is a note. Judy took the boat in the early hours of the day, and she sailed off. Now, the only thing left for Jen to do is head back. She decides to do so in Steve's car, the same car that killed Ted. The whole time on the drive, she's talking to Judy, even though Judy isn't there with her, but she's there in spirit. It's not like Jen is going back by herself, though. She decided to bring the cat. She gets back to Laguna just in enough time to go see Henry's concert, and when she enters the church, the 1,000 paper cranes that Judy made are strewn from the ceiling, so she gets even more emotional. The music choice is also interesting. The kids are singing Come On Get Happy, a song all about death. That doesn't help things. She makes her way slowly down the aisle until she finds Lorna along with Charlie. Both Lorna and Charlie know what happened to Judy. They know that she's gone. They also know that Jen is very fragile at the moment. But then somebody comes and sits right down next to her, and it's Ben. He got out for good behavior. Judy sent him a flyer for the concert, so he knew where to find Jen. But when he asked Jen, is Judy here? Jen just looks up at all the paper cranes and says, yep, and then starts crying. Jen is now going to the grief group for a whole nother reason. Not her husband, but her friend. The good news is she gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl. But no, she didn't name it Judy. I thought that too. She named it Joey. She thought naming it Judy would be weird. She's continued to live her life at her house. Ben has moved in. He's getting along great with the kids. Everything seems to be going great for Jen. But something has been bothering her. The fact that she never told Ben what happened to his brother. So she turns to Ben and says, I have something to tell you. And that is how Dead to Me ends. Thank you so much for watching this recap. If you watched the other ones, I really appreciate that too. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down if you thought it sucked. I have a Patreon, I have merch, I have a membership, I have a bunch of ways that lead to you giving me money, but I do appreciate that. And normally I say I'll talk to you next season, but in this case, I won't.